How many of you are citizens of the United States of America? Hands up. Good. I want to tell you why I asked. Recently, I've had some complaints. I know that's strange for anybody to say that. Why in the world would anyone ever have any complaints about what I do? I've had some complaints from listeners and readers complaining about what they call dabbling in politics. They didn't think I ought to be dabbling in politics. I think my radio program, a couple of them recently on freedom, must have twisted a couple of nuts off somewhere, if I'm going to use that expression. I got this postcard from someone. It's one of these postcards that kind of that has in different colors of ink and bold letters and exclamation points. It really, in fact, it was, if it had been a bullet, I'd be dead. But it was really vehement about what he perceived as my support for what he called Bush's war. Now that makes a useful departure for a subject that concerns me very deeply. Consider this. So let me ask you perhaps this question. According to the Constitution of the United States, who has the sole power to declare war? Oh, you mean it's not the president? Oh, the President of the United States, then, under our Constitution, does not have the authority to declare or authorize war on his own. That's what I thought. I sort of felt that was the way it was. So, there is this phrase, the people of the United States in Congress assembled. You know what that means? What it means is this, that whenever Congress comes together, they are us. And so they will say, we, the people of the United States in Congress assembled, and what they do in our name, they do by our authority, they are our elected representatives. The Constitution gives them the authority to declare war, period. Therefore, as citizens of this country, you are responsible for the war in Iraq, even if you didn't vote. In fact, you may be more responsible for the war if you didn't vote than if you had. Now, that's a sobering thing for you to think about, but here you are, you're in this country, you have certain rights, and along with those rights comes certain responsibilities. Things that you have to measure up to in order to be a citizen of the United States and to be a good citizen of this country. In fact, if you had voted for Ralph Nader in 2000, you would be able to say today, I am not responsible for the war in Iraq. I voted for a man who would have opposed it. If you didn't vote, you can't say that, can you? Now, we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Therefore, this is not Bush's war. It's ours. It's yours. It's mine. It belongs to all of us, and we are responsible for it. Now, if you get up in the morning and you feel like really chewing out somebody in government, just go to your mirror and start in. Because you are staring at a person who is in the government of the United States of America. As the famous Pogo once said, we have met the enemy, and he is us. So point number one. If you hear some talking head on television pontificating about Bush's war, you will know that he is either a demagogue or an idiot. And it's possible to be both at the same time. Now, on the broader point of meddling in politics, I'll borrow a phrase from John the Baptist. I will confess and deny not, I am not a prophet. Everybody got that straight? I make no claims to the prophetic office, but I have a radio program called Born to Win. It is widely listened to. I think our listenership probably is now something close to 200,000 people in a week. I have that, and I have the writings of the prophets in my hand. I read them, and I understand most of what I read. Not all, but enough. And so whether I like it or not, having been given that forum, having been given that place where I can present these things, I feel that I have an obligation to address the things that any prophet of God would address if he were here and able to speak to these people at this time. Now, then that raises the next question. Does any prophet have any business preaching about politics? Well, I don't have any interest in engaging in politics. But commentary on politics seems to me to be fully justified. You know what politics is, don't you? It basically is the art or science of government and of governing. It has to do, we use the word as a dirty word. It has to do with tricky backroom maneuvering, stabbing people in the back, and all this kind of thing. But that's not what the dictionary talks about in politics. Politics is purely the art of governing. Now, so consequently, if you say that, then any prophet of God and any servant of God who understands the prophets should have an obligation, I think, to address problems, issues, and things that go on in government. Now, our Constitution and the structure of our laws does not permit me in my radio program or in our tax-exempt corporation, as such, to advocate one candidate or another. But that doesn't mean that I can't address either one of them according to their works, according to their sins, according to their failings, and according to the way they are leading this people, contrary to or in concordance with the Word of God. Shall we take a look at some prophets that dabbled in politics? Why not? My first example comes on the heels of a judicial murder. Just simple murder. King Ahab wanted a piece of land. He was like a pitiful child. He couldn't get it. The guy wouldn't sell it to him. He said, it's been in my family for generations. I'm not going to sell this land. Ahab was so, through such a fit, he made himself sick. Went to bed, turned his face to the wall. His wife was no shrinking violet. She arranged to have the man killed. She arranged it. She set it all up. False witnesses, the whole 9 yards. Accused him of blasphemy, had him stoned to death, killed him, and she went into Ahab and said, get out of that bed, go take possession. The land is yours for the taking. Oh, it came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned. This is 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 15. 1 Kings 21, verse 15. When Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, she said to Ahab, arise and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. He refused to give it to you for money. He's not alive anymore. He's dead. Go take it. Now it came to pass when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he arose to go down to the vineyard of Naboth to take possession of it. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Now Elijah we know was a hairy man who wore leather. He was really what we would probably call today a tough hombre. As I've often opined, if he rode into town today, he'd probably be riding a Harley. He was no shrinking violet himself. Go down and meet Ahab, the king of Israel in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone down to take possession of it. And I want you to speak to him. Thus saith the Lord, have you killed and taken possession? And you shall speak to him, saying, thus saith the Lord, in the place where the dogs licked the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick your blood, even yours? And whenever Elijah came down to meet this man, he looked up and saw Elijah, and Ahab said to Elijah, have you found me, O my enemy? He knew when he walked on the scene that it was bad news. Elijah was just not a good news prophet, let's face it. God has a toolbox. And when he wants a man for a job, he fumbles around the toolbox and pulls out the one that fits the job at hand. And Elijah, when you saw him, you knew it was bad news. Of course, that's true of almost any prophet. God does not send us prophets to tell us how well we are doing. Have you found me, O my enemy? He knew who he was. He knew it was bad news because he knew that Elijah didn't shy to dabble in politics. That is, that he would speak the truth to power. He said, I have found you because you have sold yourself to work evil in the sight of the Lord. Behold, I will bring evil upon you, and I will take away your posterity, and will cut off from Ahab him that pisses against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel. Hard language. As I said, he was a hairy man and wore leather. He had the bark on. He's the kind of a guy who would wear out his clothes from the inside. So don't expect the poetry of an Isaiah coming from Elijah. Now, I want you to understand this. This is not commentary on the radio. This isn't an article written in a piece of paper somewhere. This is eyeball to eyeball with a man that could have taken his head off. Because, Ahab went nowhere alone. He would have had a retinue. He'd have had his guys there. And all he had to do was say the word, and they would have taken Elijah's head off. Why didn't he? He was afraid of him. Ahab was afraid of this man. Jezebel wasn't. Ahab was more sensible than Jezebel. He was afraid of this man because he knew in his heart of hearts that this man spoke for God. It's not only speaking truth to power. Elijah had done this before. He knew who he was, and he knew all about it. And he was already considered to be a political enemy of Ahab. He finally ends up fleeing for his life, not from Ahab, but from Jezebel. Now, Elijah started with the king. Isaiah, when his turn came to prophesy, actually had a good king or two in the long period of time in which he prophesied. He probably started, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he started somewhere around age 20, because he was a prophet for a very long time in Israel. And for some reason, with him, with Samuel, with Jeremiah, with others, God seems to have started with these men when they were very, very young. I suppose that has to do maybe with the level of energy, courage, or what some people would call foolhardiness. Because whenever we're 20 years old, we think we're going to live forever, and that nothing ever bad will ever happen to us. And maybe we're a little freer at those young ages to take risks with our lives and to go stand up to a man of power and tell him off. I don't know. But for whatever his reasons, God picks them out young. Well, he picked Isaiah. Now, he had a good king or two that said to deal with, but there were other things that went on in government that had to be addressed. Isaiah addresses them. In Isaiah chapter 28, woe to the crown, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, who are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. Behold, the Lord has a mighty and a strong one, which has a tempest of hail and a destroying storm, like a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand. What will he cast down? The crown of pride. The drunkards of Ephraim shall be trodden underfoot. Now here's my question. Should I dare to point out that a certain well-connected senator has on more than one occasion when giving an official speech slurred his speech? And he doesn't have a mental problem. He doesn't have some problem, some stroke or anything of the sort. Why is it that the cartoonists commonly predict him with a bottle of hooch in his pocket? Truth is, everybody in his dog knows he's an alcoholic. And he walks the halls of the Senate, and he has the power to change the men who are going to stand in judgment of you if you ever get hauled into court. Should we dare to say the man is a drunk and should not be in the Senate of the United States? Are we allowed to say that the reason why he went off and left, was it Mary Jo Kopechnik? Was that her name? Oh, yeah. Dying in the waters off Chappaquiddick? Because he had to get away and dry out before he could call the police? That if they had come immediately and tested him, he would have been over the limit of alcohol? Dare we say this? Everyone knows this. Continuing in verse 4. Is that dabbling in politics? Whenever you declare that a senator of the United States is a drunk and ought to be drummed out of the place. And the glorious beauty, verse 4, which is on the head of the fat valley, shall be a fading flower, as the hasty fruit before the summer, and which he that looks up upon it sees, when it is yet in his hand, he eats it up. In that day the Lord of hosts shall be for a crown of glory, for a diadem of beauty unto the residue of his people, and for a spirit of judgment upon him that sits in judgment, and for strength upon them that turn to the battle to the gate. But they also, who? Those who sit in judgment. the judges, have also erred through wine, and through strong drink are out of the way. The priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up with wine. They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. For all tables are full of vomit and filthiness, and there is no place clean. What's he talking about? He is basically saying your judicial system is corrupt from one end to the other, from the top to the bottom, from east to west and north to south. It is totally corrupt. He implies it's corrupt through drunkenness. In our generation, it may be alcohol, it may be drugs, it may be marijuana. God only knows what it is. But one thing I know for sure, I know that our judicial system is corrupt. It has been corrupted by presidents, senators, congressmen who have placed these men in office and who protect them as they are in office. Somebody, somewhere, ought to be saying that to somebody. In our society, by the way, this is tantamount to condemning not only the preachers, but also Congress, because the priests in this time actually were a part of the civil government of Israel. So you had the king, you had the princes, you had the priests, but then you have the prophets over here, and they are really in the role of what today you would call the preachers. They are the men who get on television and preach to the masses. They are the guys who get up in front of their churches and preach to their churches. And he condemns them. He also condemns the priests, who are, I'll say, the equivalent of senators. He also condemns the princes, or maybe the priests are the equivalent of the House, the princes of the Senate, and the king, equivalent to the president. He takes the hide off of all of them in his prophecies. So I have to say, this was political speech in Isaiah's day, and it was dangerous. Then there is my good friend Jeremiah. Man whom I love, his prophecies. He's a powerful prophet. And by the way, if you have trouble with Jeremiah, read him in the Living Bible. That's the one place that fellow really shines who did that paraphrase. There are sections of that just will make you weep. In Jeremiah chapter 8, there is this passage. At that time, saith the Lord, they will bring out the bones of the kings of Judah and the bones of his princes, the bones of the priests, the bones of the prophets, the bones of the inhabitants of Jerusalem out of their graves. The enemy is going to come in, he's going to destroy the city, and they're going to go find all the kings, princes, priests, prophets, and everything else. They're going to dig them up and spread their bones over on the landscape to bleach. They shall spread them before the sun, the moon, and all the host of heaven whom they have loved, and whom they have served, and after whom they have walked, and whom they have sought, and whom they have worshipped. They will not be gathered nor buried. They shall be for dung on the face of the earth. These are people who worship the host of heavens. Now, you might think that back in that day, he means Ishtar and all these heavenly bodies and the constellations and all these kind of things. That's fine. Today, once again, they assume that we are made of stardust, of star stuff, that we are a product of the universe, of natural law, and people today worship nature, or at least they place nature in the place of God and ignore God. He said, death shall be chosen rather than life by all the residue of them that remain of this evil family, which remain in all the places where I have driven them. What is he talking about? He's talking about the royal house. He's talking about those people who were in governing positions in Israel. He calls them this evil family. All right. What are we supposed to do if we live in a time when it is exactly the same? For again and again, I don't have it in my notes today, but again and again, God will say, and shall not my soul be avenged on a nation such as this? And what he is saying is simply this, that if I ever find another people like this, the same thing is going to happen again. So what are we supposed to do? Just retreat into our shell? Go off to our little retreats and our fellowship and our feasts and our types of things and not bother saying anything about what these people are doing to this country? Who is Jeremiah calling an evil family? The last of the kings of Judah, it seems. Is that political speech? I think so. Jeremiah chapter 21. The word of the Lord which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, when King Zedekiah sent him to Pashur the son of Melchiah and Zephaniah the son of Maaseiah the priest, saying, Inquire, I pray you, of the Lord for us, for Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon makes war against us. If so be that the Lord will deal with us according to all his wondrous works, that he may go up from us. In other words, let's beseech God. Go to God and inquire of God for us. The king of Babylon's coming down. We want God to intervene so the king of Babylon will go up from us, that is, go away from us. And Jeremiah said, this is what you go back and you tell Zedekiah. Thus says the Lord God of Israel, Behold, I will turn back the weapons of war that are in your hands, with which you fight against the king of Babylon and against the Chaldeans who besiege you outside the walls. I will assemble them into the midst of this city, and I myself will fight against you with outstretched hand, with strong arm, even in anger and in fury and in great wrath. And I will smite the inhabitants of this city, both man and beast, and they shall die of a great pestilence. Who is this message for? Zedekiah. Who's Zedekiah? He's the king, the head man, the one whom God holds singularly responsible. Because after all, Israel asked for a king. God gave him a king. This is what your king has done. You are all responsible for what he has done. Afterward, says the Lord, I will deliver Zedekiah, king of Judah, his servants and the people, everyone that is left in this city, from the pestilence, from the sword and the famine, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, into the hands of their enemies, into the hands of those that seek their life. I'm going to deliver them all up. Verse 8, And unto this people you shall say, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I set before you the way of life and the way of death. He that abides in this city shall die by the sword and by the famine, the pestilence. He that goes out and falls to the Chaldeans that besiege you, he shall live. His life shall be to him for a prey. You realize what he's saying? He is urging the people of the city to give up. Just give up. Go out, surrender, go off into captivity, you'll live. You stay here and fight, you're going to die. Now, you can begin to see why Jeremiah was headed for a lot of trouble. He wasn't advocating one candidate over another. What he was demanding was, in another case, an improvement of the judicial system, which was not taking care of God's people. Chapter 37 of Jeremiah. Then Jeremiah went forth out of Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to separate himself from there in the midst of the people. King of Babylon drew back for a few days. He decided to pack up his stuff and go off into Benjamin so maybe he could be free of all this. When he was on his way out, the captain of the ward was there. They arrested him and said, You're falling away, you're surrendering, you're defecting to the Chaldeans. He said, No, I'm not. I'm going to Benjamin just to get out of the way. He was arrested. He was accused of treason, and he was put in a dungeon. And the scripture tells us that he sunk in the thing up to his armpits in the mire that was there. What is often not realized is it was a septic system of the city that he was put into and sunk down into it with the full assumption that's where he would die. Has anybody figured out yet why it is I'm not a prophet? Don't want to be a prophet? Ain't studying on being no prophet, as I said, Jerry Glauber would say. This is not in my bailiwick right now. However, sometimes the duty that falls to men of God is to speak the truth to power. And I can see no reason to declare any portion of contemporary society off limits to preaching and teaching from the Bible. Least of all, should we exempt the government from criticism and therefore exempt them from, not speak in terms of politics. Now, if you actually think this through, to suggest that we should ignore politics and have nothing to say when our people are doing this, going precisely the same way that Israel of old went, I think that's absolute nonsense. Now, there's Ezekiel. I didn't mention Ezekiel yet. In Ezekiel 33, there is this passage of Scripture which I have to take very seriously. In Ezekiel 33, verse 1, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of your people and say to them, When I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him for their watchman, and if he sees the sword coming on the land, he should blow a trumpet and warn the people. Okay, stick a man up here, have him look out. If he sees it coming, he's supposed to sound a trumpet, say, hey, there, the enemy is coming. Whoever hears the sound of the trumpet and takes not warning, then if the sword come and take him away, his blood will be on his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet, he took no warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that takes warning shall deliver his soul. Now here's the part that I have to take very seriously in all of this. If the watchman sees the sword come and does not blow the trumpet, and the people are not warned, if the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity. His blood I will require at the watchman's hand. If you see it and you don't warn, you're guilty. So you, son of man, I have set you as a watchman to the house of Israel. Therefore you shall hear the word of my mouth and warn them from me. When I say to the wicked, O wicked man, you shall surely die, if you do not speak to warn the wicked from his way, the wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but he'll die, but I'm going to require his blood at your hand. Now, I'm not Ezekiel, and God hasn't appointed me to any watchman, at least he hadn't told me if he has. But at the same time, can I ignore this? Do I dare ignore this? Do I dare keep silent when I see these things coming down? Having cataloged the sins of the people in his day, by the pen of Jeremiah, God said, and shall not my soul be avenged on a nation such as this? The answer is obviously yes. And guess what? We are a nation such as this. We are a nation just like that, making precisely the same mistakes in our own way, with our own technology, and with our own vernacular. I've learned over time people are fond of their little sound bites. Someone, for example, when I was talking, I thought we should be able to vote as Christians, said, well, Paul may have been a Roman citizen, but he didn't vote for Nero. And my question, do you suppose that person was so ill-informed that he didn't realize no one voted for Nero? Nero was emperor. That's a different world. They were in an occupied country. You know, trying to use an example of the Christians in the first century of non-involvement in politics is asinine. It was a different world. It was a different time. The Romans called the shots in those days, and a Christian had all he could do to stay alive and free. And a lot of them didn't do either one. If you want a valid comparison to the kind of government we have today, you have to go all the way back to the book of Judges to find anything in the Bible that resembles what we have today. Judges 21:25, one verse. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Maximum freedom. Well, that also created maximum headaches. You know, there's no doubt about it. Freedom has its headaches. It has a background noise that goes with it. And I've often said that people will oftentimes give up on God. They'll give up on the church. They'll give up on what we're trying to do because they can't stand the background noise of freedom. That background noise oftentimes involves people bickering with one another, arguing doctrine, arguing this, arguing that. People who are themselves not really thinking about God. I think it would be a mistake to think that in those days there was no government. That is a major error people make when they look at the time of the judges. There was a government. There were judges. There were priests. There were Levites. There were courts of judgment. There were elders over tribes. And the elders would sit in the gate and hear cases. The gate, sitting in the gate in those days, was the equivalent of your courthouse. Your county courthouse, where they may send you a summons and call you down there like an elder of the gate in the old days to hear cases and to render decisions that are made there of right and wrong behavior on the part of people, to judge the guilty, to free the innocent, and to protect the weak and the powerless. They could sit and complain. The elders sat in the gate and heard cases. Now, Israel had her ups and downs in the days of the judges. It was a rocky time to be alive, but they were free. The worst was yet to come once Israel had a centralized government. Now the people could relax and let the government do their worrying. Now they could declare themselves innocent of any wrongdoing by their government. They could sit and complain about what the government was doing, but it wasn't their fault. It was the government that's doing all these things. But you probably have heard the saying, a fish rots from the head, but the whole thing does go. Their entire legal system, once they had a king, became corrupted to the point that there was no justice in the land. And you don't have to be an expert in prophecy to find that out. You can't read very far in any of the prophets to see this complaint about the lack of justice in the land. The fact that you go to court, you can't expect to be treated fairly in the courts. And it should be apparent to anybody that God held the people responsible for the corruption of their government in the days of the kings. Now, why would I say that? How can I say that? How, when it's the king who is responsible, how can I say that God held the people responsible? Who went into captivity? Who? The people. All of them? Yeah, nearly all of them went into captivity. Now, why do you punish, and why would God punish innocent people who didn't have any bad thing to do with any of this stuff up there? Because they were responsible for it. They were a part of the system even that way. And I can say that because the prophet said it. Because the people went right into captivity along with the government. There is this marvelous prayer in Daniel 9. But this prayer, this beautiful prayer, says some very important things that I think sometimes are overlooked. And I'd like to go through it with you to point out what I think is often overlooked. Daniel 9, verse 1. In the first year of Darius, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of years whereby the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. You see, what Daniel had done at this point was, he had just suddenly come face to face with the truth that he would die in Babylon. That he would never see Jerusalem again. He would never see his homeland. He'd never smell the smell of the trees or feel the soil in his hands. Not ever again. He would live and grow old and die in Babylon, and he was crushed by the realization of that truth. And he said, I set my face to the Lord to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. And I prayed to the Lord my God, and I made my confession. And I said, O Lord, the great and dreadful God, keeping covenant and mercy to them that love him and that keep his commandments. We have sinned and have committed iniquity and have done wickedly and have rebelled even by departing from your precepts and from your judgments. Who has? We have. Daniel, who is listed in the Bible as one of the 3 most righteous men who ever walked the face of the earth, said we, and included himself in it. Daniel accepted the responsibility, along with everybody else, for the bad stuff that went down in his place and his time. Important thing to us to understand. Neither have we listened to your servants the prophets that spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, and to all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face as at this day, to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to all Israel that are near and are far off, through all the countries where you have driven them, because of their trespass that they have trespassed against you. They all got sent away. O Lord, to us belongs confusion, shame of face, to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, because we have sinned against you. Now you do understand, don't you, that that was a political mistake, a political statement? He is addressing politics. There's no way of getting around it because it's government. Verse 9. To the Lord our God belong mercies and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against him. Neither have we obeyed the voice of the Lord our God to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. Yea, all Israel have transgressed your law, even by departing, that they might not obey your voice. All of us have. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. And you know the funny thing about it, when I think about this, I have to realize that I have got less excuse than Daniel had, because I live in a place where I can at least participate in governance. And you know, I have to then cast back my mind and realize that with all the stuff that I don't know about Israel at the time, that the people must have had a role in governance in those times as well. And the people, along with the king, all failed, just like we are failing. He goes on to say, God has confirmed his words which he spoke against us and against our judges that judged us. And people, if you ask me what I think is the most important issue in the upcoming presidential campaign, I will not tell you it's a war in Iraq. I will sure not tell you it's the economy. I will tell you it's the judges. It is the judges that the next president is going to appoint, and the Senate will confirm or not confirm. That is probably the most crucial thing that faces our society today. And it will have more to do with the kind of country you're going to live in 20 years from now than the war in Iraq will have. Believe me. Because what is happening in the country right now is that judges are now becoming legislators. With the best of intentions, they have decided to take in hand to try to improve society, to conciliate people who are at war with one another. And they have completely forgotten that the people who are responsible for governing this country are who? We are. In our elected representatives and in government, we are the people who are supposed to determine those things. They are supposed to judge the law. But they have gone way beyond the law. Everybody knows it. They know it. But they feel that what they are doing is best for us. And boy, have you heard that from the time you were a kid. Your parents said, I know what's best for you. They were right. But since when are judges supposed to act as parents to a mature people such as we? This is, in my opinion, the biggest issue that faces us. You notice I didn't tell you which president to vote for? What I did tell you is the judges that are going to be coming down the pike out of this next administration are going to be crucial to your future, so you had better think it through. Then he goes on to say, you have brought upon us this great evil, for under the whole heaven has not been done as has been done upon Jerusalem. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this evil has come upon us, yet we did not make our prayer before the Lord our God, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand your truth. There is much more in this prayer. You owe it to yourself to go read it from the point of view that I've presented to you today. As I said, Daniel is listed as one of the three most righteous men in Israel's history. And yet, in his confession, he accepts full responsibility for the evil that Israel had done. And I ask the question, why did he do that? Look at where he was. He wasn't home. He was in captivity. And he did not evade the responsibility for what happened to him. And so, with God as my helper, I'm going to try to follow his examples. I intend to accept responsibility for what's happening in this country. I intend to use the Born to Win program to speak truth to power every chance I get. I will vote in every election. I'm 70 years old now, and I'm exempt from jury duty in the state of Texas. But if I am called, I will go anyway, and I will serve willingly. I will condemn the guilty, and I will free the innocent, as every good citizen of a country like ours should do. I don't know how much of a difference I can make in the big picture. But whatever difference I can make, I will make.